Thank you for choosing to watch this video. I should be tying a Mallard and Claret. It's a winged wet fly. Used to be one of my firm favourites, but I've not used it for quite a few years now. Start off by mounting your hook in the vise and checking the hold. Here I'm using one of Fulling Mill's competition heavyweight hooks in a size 12. Then catch on your thread. For this fly I'm using Semperfli's classic wax thread in 12 knot. Once you've caught your thread on, trim off the waist and form a smooth underbody. We'll catch the tail of this fly, which is natural golden pheasant tippet, in at the rear of the shank. You want the tail to be around the same length as the body, and with the golden pheasant tippet tail you want a little black bar showing, so it is worth taking your time to select the feather of the correct size. Select your bunch of tippet fibres and catch them in on top of the shank. Once you've caught them in, check that you're happy with where they're sitting and they're square on top of the shank, and catch in the waist ends. We'll take the thread up towards the eye and we'll catch in the rib and tie that in down the full length of the body. For the rib in this fly we're using some gold oval tinsel from Lagartun. So catch it on the underside of the shank and just pull it down so that you'll be able to cover all the tinsel as you wrap the body. We'll bring the thread back up to capture the end at the eye after. So tie it in down the full length of the body, making sure we try and even up the tie-in point of the rib and the tail without moving the tail too much. And then just check that we've got a smooth underbody and we're covering up all the tinsel. The dubbed body will hide any unevenness in the underbody, but it's still good practice to try and keep it as smooth as possible. And then take your thread back down to the end of the body and we're ready to dub the body. The dubbing we're using on this fly is Fulling Mill's Seal X dub in Claret. It's a nice rich claret colour, which I like for this fly. When you're applying the dubbing to the thread, always twist it in the same direction and use as much pressure as you can as you twist the dubbing on. That'll make it catch on to itself much better. Take your time, make sure you've covered the tie-in point and the rear of the fly properly with the dubbing. I like to create a slight taper to the body of the fly, so I don't want to go too heavy at the start, otherwise you'll end up with a overly heavily dressed fly. As always, add more dubbing as you need. It's always easier to add more than it is to take away if you apply too much at the start. We have to keep in mind that we've got to put a hackle and the bronze mallard wing on at the front of this fly, so we need to stop the body short enough that we don't crowd the eye. About a eye's width is typically enough. Shouldn't be too far off from there, maybe just a little bit more dubbing. And next we want to wind our rib up in open, even turns. I think that ribbing's a bit too close together, so I'll just go back and redo it, holding the rib at a slightly steeper angle to open up the turns. 4 or 5 turns should be about right for a fly of this size, with a slightly tighter turn at the head just to make sure I've got a nice secure tying point. Catch it in with a few wraps of thread and then trim away the tinsel we don't need. Then we tidy up the tying point and take the thread back to the end of the body, ready to tie in our hen hackle. For this fly we're going to use a Claret Hen, and we want to select a feather that has a barb length that will reach to roughly about the point of the hook. And so select my feather, I'll strip away the fluff from the base, and there it is, and we'll isolate the tip of the feather, which we'll tie it in by. Try and make sure we don't catch any of the barbs going forward. Catch the feather in with a few turns of thread and then bind it, trap it back in the way back to the tying point. Hold the thread under tension as we break the tip away to make sure the feather doesn't pull out. The number of turns of hackle required will depend on the feather, but usually between 2 to 4 turns will be enough. Fold the barbs back as we wind the hackle on. Try and keep everything pointing back towards the rear of the fly. I think with this feather I've got just enough to give the hackle that I want. Once you're happy with the amount of hackle, catch in the stock with the tying thread. Normally I would catch in with a few turns of thread and then trap it back again, but the hackle stock broke away. Fortunately it's securely tied in and is neat enough that I can live with it as is. Tidy up the tying point, ready for placing the wing. The wing in this fly is bronze mallard, so I've aligned the tips of a section of the feather. I'll trim that away. It's hard to describe how much of the feather you need. It often depends on the feather and the size of the fly you're tying. Just a bit of experience you'll get an eye for it as you go. Once you remove the slip of the feather, you want to fold it on itself 3 times to give you the bunch like this. You measure it up for length. You want the end of the wing to be somewhere around the middle of the tail or just beyond the bend of the hook. Pinch and loop to catch it on top of the hook, and then secure with another couple of wraps of thread. Check that you're happy with the length and where the wing's sitting. Secure it off and put a little locking turn in front of the wing, stub and trim away the waste. Take your time and be careful not to pull the wing out of place as you're doing this. Once you've removed the waste end of the feathers, wrap a few turns of thread over the cut ends to secure, and as you form the neat head, fold any fibres and feather barbs back as well. That's looking pretty good, so I'll put on a 3-turn whip finish to tie off the fly. Trim away your thread once you've got your whip finish done. Now just give it a little bit of a brush to make sure I've not got any of the feather trapped. Pull out a little bit of the dubbing and it just helps tidy up the wing a little bit. Then I've finished the fly with some Solara's bone dry clear UV resin. Being careful not to get the resin on any of the feather. Set the resin with the UV lamp, and that's the fly finished. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please drop it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. As always, any comments and feedback are always welcome, and if there's any patterns you'd like to see me tie, just mention them in the comments. Thank you.